In what way was Auma Obama a worthy protagonist, given your concerns? Was it as predictable as, oh gosh, her brother is now President of the United States, there's some kind of possibility in all this because our publicity machine will run off that?
Well, clearly...
In other words, in what way did you find that Auma herself was a worthy vehicle of your concerns, regardless of her relationship to Barack Hussein Obama Jr., President of the US?
Well, I had initially tried to get funding to make a film about us four African women at film school and how we go out into the world and try and be filmmakers. And I had put forward a proposal for that project and it hadn't been taken up. But years later, having made other films, the name Obama started to become prominent due to Auma's brother becoming a senator. And so my commissioning editor came back to me and said to me, you know, we've made these films together, you're always talking about identity, you're always talking about people of different identities and all that. This man is also somebody with different roots and so on. Is that somebody you would like to make a film about? And I said, no, not really, because another aspect of all my films is that they're always about people I am close to for whatever reason, so that I can get personal, you know, and talk about something in an intimate and not a superficial way. So I said, I know his sister, and she is a fascinating person, and her story, I believe, is our story as post-colonial African women who've, you know, there are millions of us. It's not just a tiny minority. People who have studied, have gone to the university, have taken up this role of inheriting an independence movement, parents who had tried to create new countries, you know, in the early 60s. She personifies all that. And the fact that she's related to somebody who was in the public eye worldwide gave the opportunity, brought, you know, cosmically brought things together that made it possible to make this project.
But I think that coming home, there must have been, okay, you've had this experience, you've experienced the other. There must have been a measure of disillusionment, delusion, whatever D word one might choose. How difficult has it been for you to come back home? And did you find that you just sort of, there was a cog in there and you fitted marvelously?
Well, it's not that easy to come home. And a lot of Africans who've gone away from home, and Auma will be angry with me for saying Africans because it's too generic a term, but people from different African countries who've gone outside to study ended up working like me, like many of us. And then at one point you say, okay, now it's time to go back home and make a contribution there. I've learned a lot, and my film is called The Education of Auma Obama, and I've been educated by the process of making that film because I followed her story. She came home in the end, you know, and settled here and started to contribute and give back to her society. And so I look at that and think that's a way, and I'm trying to gently come back with my topics, with my themes, with the stories I'm dealing with. You know, I've made stories about African Germans, and now I'm slowly coming back to this continent to try and make stories here. But I have to be relevant. I don't want to be a navel gazer, as you put it. I want whatever I have to say to be something that's of use to the people around.
Two things, because time is not on our side. I'm interested on your take on one topic. My own antecedents, school teacher for close to 30 years, and making the transition, always going in and out of the artistic field, making the odd movie, acting in the odd play, presenting the odd television show, and being the person who is the showbiz personality. So there's this whole generic of showbiz and education.
Right.
Do you think that showbiz can educate?
Yes.
Do you think views, please?
Yes, I'm glad you raised that, because I think the role you've played and the role you are playing is very key to what one can do constructively in show business. One can get people's attention and bring them to think
ratings, revenue,
yes.
ratings. Showbiz is about the superficial. It is about the superficial.
It is.
So maybe we're not doing so grand a project.
Well, I think people love to be educated. They love to be brought to think about things that they have not thought about before. And I think that ratings, we can be educated even in our tastes. We can be brought to enjoy and things that are more intellectually demanding. It's just a question of, you know, responsibility on the part of the artists. you know, because I think people can be appealed to on many different levels.
Right, you brought up another issue, which when you spoke earlier, you brought up the buzzword funding.
Yeah.
You talked about a commissioning editor.
Yes.
And this idea that, you know, we have to tell our own story, but we need funding,
Yeah.
and the understanding is that we ourselves don't have the money. So you'd never think of coming to me to fund your next film.
Yes, no,
So-
you're right.
Right, so how is, again, your comments, because you've obviously been there, done that, lived through it,
Well,
and are living through it.
Yeah, well, I'm based at the moment in Berlin, as you said, so I look for my funding in my environment. But and of course, in that case, if you want to make a film about a subject matter that is not necessarily interesting to the Germans, you've got to find, and that's why Oma again is a fascinating protagonist, because she's very interesting to the Germans. She studied there, she lived there for 16 years, so she's a known figure within the German context. But I think you're right. Why should we not fund our own films? If I want to make a film about Christopher Okpako, it's up to the Nigerian government or Nigerian broadcasters to commission me to make that film, because it's all about us seeing what is important about our stories and finding a way to tell them.
So we're talking about, okay, have you had any thought about state budgets? At what point, possibly an unfair question, we're thinking now as Kenyans about a new government, a new dispensation, a brand new constitution, and we have a ministry of sports and culture. But there are lots of other ministries as well. What part of the sort of national budget should go to the arts? Can't the riposte just be, we don't have any money, think about it slowly, your time will come? There's people to feed, people to educate. How important is the arts to a society?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't dare to impose my views on a government. I'm very excited to see what's happening here, this new constitution. People glued to the set, seeing what's going on in Parliament, conversations about how devolution is going to take place. I find it really exciting to see people so engaged civically in their country's affairs.
But I'm going back to the thing.
Yes,
I'm going to say don't make your film. You know, there's no time for it.
Yes. Well, I would disagree.
Right.
I would very, very strongly disagree. It is extremely important to invest in culture. It is extremely important because culture feeds you. It is also food. Culture feeds our spirit, and our spirit is also important. So the practicalities are there, but taking care of the spirit and taking care of culture is key, I think.
Right. Well, one last major area of your views on this idea of how we make ourselves visible to the outside world. Now, I've never been to Berlin. I'm afraid I've never been to Germany, full stop. But is the perception the Germans have of Kenya, let's be specific, let's not say Africa, let's say Kenya or Nigeria perhaps, is it the right one, and to what extent do your films go to redress any stereotypical perceptions?
Well, I'm very keen on that. I'm very keen on redressing stereotypes in general, and my system, my style to address that is to always be very personal, to talk about someone I know and love, so that I myself don't fall into stereotypes, somebody I understand or who I'm keen to understand more. So by so doing, you have a lot of respect for the people you're dealing with. And by so doing, you treat them with respect. You give the viewer the opportunity to respect as well what they're watching and who they're listening to. And by so doing, you do away with stereotypes. But my experience going around different African countries with my work is that when I say I'm a Nigerian, in some African countries, the reaction I get is negative. And it's very painful for me, you know.
Well, the stereotypes abound. I mean,
yes.
The minute I'm sure we're all grown-ups now. They're thinking Nigerians, you know, they're traffickers, they're going to give us some drugs. I mean, how did this come about? Maybe the wrong ambassadors from Nigeria, maybe Kenyans we're all a bunch of runners, you know, we're all going to smash some sort of 50-kilometer race.
Yeah,
so how does one fight these things? By making a film that suggests that there aren't?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, just to contribute in your own small way by making the kind of films that tell the truth in inverted commas about people and give love. You know, give love and respect to everybody you're dealing with. And I think that inspires people then to do the same. That's what I'm hoping.
Right. The last question is perhaps, again, current projects, future projects. What are you up to now?
Well, I'm trying to finish this film about Christopher Okpako that I started years ago, and it's funding again. I've been doing it.
Christopher Okpako, expand. You know, generations come, generations go.
Christopher Okpako belongs to, I would say, to our parents' generation. He was a poet. He was a student, a friend of Chinua Achebe, a colleague, also a friend of Wole Soyinka. They used to play cricket together. He grew up, you know, in the time when colonialism was coming to an end, and he studied at the University of Ibadan, the classics. He studied Greek and Latin. The fascinating thing about him, I think, is again the way he marries the different cultures, because he was a Catholic. He was the reincarnation of his maternal grandfather, who was a priest and worshipped a certain river goddess. So he was responsible to keep up those responsibilities. He studied Greek and Latin, so he had that Western influence. And he managed, you know, in harmony and beauty, to bring all these cultural influences together and create this amazing poetry. In the end, he died on the front fighting for Biafra, because he was a Biafran.
Right, okay. And when will it be ready?
I wish I could answer that question.
Right, okay. When will we see your film on a grander scale in Kenya, the education of Obama? Because that's another thing, all these marvelous things. You win the Toronto Festival, you win the Beijing Festival, you win the London Festival, and you only show it twice in Nairobi and off you go. Very quickly, what can we do to address that situation?
Well, John, can you help?
Branwen Okpako, thank you so very much for coming on the JSO interview.
Thank you so much for having me, John.